Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a reminder to meeting attendees that this is a formal meeting. I can advise that members of the public will be given an opportunity to speak during the public open session, but not at other times. This meeting is being filmed, and by being present, attendees are deemed to have agreed to be filmed and to the use of those images and sound recordings. I can advise that attendees should not disclose any personal information of individuals, as this would infringe the data protection rights of that individual. May I please ask everyone to mute their microphones when not speaking. So the first item on the agenda today is the apologies for absence. I've had one from Councillor North. Are there any other apologies, please? Thank you.
Sorry, can I just record that the Councillor Sajid is out of the country, so whether he's given his formal apologies, he couldn't possibly be here tonight. He's on business.
Yes, thank you. If that could be noted, please. Item 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest, to receive statutory declarations of interest from members in relation to, firstly, a disclosable pecuniary interest in any item in the agenda. Now, I think we all have that interest in terms of setting the precept, so I think that should be noted, but we have a dispensation to be able to deal with that, if I'm correctly. So I think that's are there any other declarations of interest? Item B is non-pecuniary interests in any item on the agenda. Thank you. Item 3 is Chairman's announcements, and I'm delighted to say that I have no announcements. Item 4 on the agenda is the public open session. There are no members of the public physically present. Are there any members online, Funda, please? No one wishes to speak. So that's the public open session. Item 5 is invited speaker, of which there's none. Item 6 is members' questions. Have any members got any questions, please? We've got no questions, and we'll move on to item 7A, which is the minutes of the meeting of the Financial and General Purposes Committee of Tuesday, 5th December 2023 at these offices. You've got them before you. I'll refer to the page numbering, and this is for accuracy only. First page is page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9. Is it your wish that I sign these as a true and correct record? Thank you. I think that's carried. All in favour? Yeah. Thank you. Item 8 is matters arising from those minutes. So on the same basis, I'll take it page by page. Page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9. If there's no matters arising, I'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is item 9A, the precept report. You have a paper before you which has been prepared by the Town Clerk and Head of Finance. Do either of the officers wish to make any comments at this stage, or would members like to comment? The officers do not wish to make any introduction. I think the papers are comparatively self-explanatory. Have members got any questions or wish to speak, please? Councillor Knight.
Firstly, thank you for the report. So I guess I have a few concerns. I think the overall proposal seems reasonable, but I feel the information in the report at around 5 pages is a bit light to support a budget of proposal of 1.6 million. So I'm just going to mention a few of the things that I think should have been in the public report that concern me. In the public report, there's no mention of the increase to the tax base, which I understand has increased by about half of 1%, which gives us an additional 8,300. I think that should have been in the public report. I welcome savings of just over 29,000, but again, in the public report, there's nothing there explaining where they've come from. And I think there needs to be, so we can be reassured that there aren't going to be any cuts to important key services. I can't see a comparison to last year's budget. So last year's budget was 1.53 million. That figure isn't in here. And that again surprises me because I would expect to see a comparison between last year's budget and this year's budget. Another omission, I think, is there's no detailed budget by account code. And I checked with a couple of committee chairs yesterday. My understanding is the per committee budgets haven't been reviewed by the chairs of the committee. They haven't seen those. So, for example, the chair of TCM, to my mind, should have had the opportunity to review the budget for Christmas lights, for example, and understand how that is comparing to last year. And that hasn't happened. So that's a concern. So noticing that we didn't have that per budget or per department account code comparison of last year versus this year, I went back and looked at what we had last year. And in the exact same meeting we had last year on the 17th of January, that information wasn't provided. And this committee, obviously a slightly different makeup, members resolved that officers should present that budgetary information in detail by account code, accompanied by the original estimates and the outturn to council. So we had the exact same mission last year, and we had to resolve that officers provide us with that. So I'm disappointed that that seems to have happened again 2 years in a row. Then one last thing I'll mention, there's the comparative weekly figure of 20p a week. And I know I've said this privately, I've said this before. I find that weekly comparison irrelevant and bordering insulting to residents, because you can't pay your council tax per week. There's no annual figure. Why is there no annual increase figure, just a weekly figure? That feels like it's an attempt to diminish the increase to the budget. And I think we should be presenting the annual figure, maybe monthly, but certainly not weekly. So what is the annual cost if we go ahead with the proposed 5.5% rise to each household? Maybe officers can explain. So I think where I get to on this is, I think, to my mind, this committee tonight can only make a provisional recommendation to full council based on the increase that's proposed. But we need to see the detail we requested last year, and that needs to be reviewed in detail, I think, before we can approve this budget.
Thank you. Have any other members got any comments or anything they wish to say at this stage, or would they like the officers to answer the questions just raised? Councillor Foster.
I think perhaps it's appropriate for the officers to answer the questions so far, and then that may give other further questions.
Thank you. Mr. Tarrant.
There's a number of questions there, if I can remember them all. So the account code information, I believe that, I mean, obviously it's clearly not in an open forum here, but I believe it had been shared with members in a different setting. Is that true?
Yes, correct. It was actually shared on 31st of October.
So has it changed? There's certainly a number of committee chairs mentioned they hadn't.
It will have changed since then.
So
yeah. So,
but it was certainly shared at that point for review and discussion.
Yeah. So that could have been part of this report, and we're happy to produce an up-to-date version if members would wish.
So I guess the main question was, what's the annual impact to a resident? Or the
I think that's already built into some draft communications that we've been discussing with members, but we have got an overall figure, haven't we?
Yes, it's an increase of £10.64.
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, and in other settings and in other papers, then which are this paper is a kind of a summarized version of previous discussions. Then you're right to say that some of the other detail was in other papers, but is not in this particular paper. I take it on board. I've tried to be succinct and just try and highlight some of the key messages, but it could have been more detailed, and it could have addressed those other issues that you've highlighted, if members would have preferred that. Yeah.
Councillor Russell.
I think the point for members is that this is the key decision of the year. In many ways, and although we've been privy to various bits of information before, tonight is the night when everything needs to be brought together, and needs to be in the public domain. I think that's the issue. So I fully support what Councillor Knight has said. And I have to say, Councillor Knight, I'm not quite sure whether you mentioned this balance sheet document. No. Well, we are used in previous years to seeing the likely balance sheet as well. So that's something else that could be added to papers. And I do hope that when we get the set of papers for council next week, these other papers can be included so that we've got the full picture on the night, because I think it's important altogether, although I acknowledge what's been said, that we have had lots of information over the last few months.
We're obviously very happy to bring the balance sheet back to council. I think it's been recently shared with members, but we can share it again. Is that true?
Yes, correct. It was actually shared last week, and it's on the website.
If I may,
but it can certainly be shared as part of the report.
if I may just say that I think members are concerned about transparency for the public, and whilst we may have had bits and pieces, I think it needs to be consolidated and rationalised. And if it could come back to full council next week with the report supporting the precept, I think that is what members are asking for. And with hindsight, perhaps it might have been included, but hindsight's a wonderful thing. Councillor Foster.
Yeah, I think essentially the same points. I mean, I'm broadly, I'm happy with the sort of the proposal, subject to having the information so we can scrutinise it, look at the detail, be clear, so that and also more as importantly, really, that members of the public can see that we've scrutinised it. Clearly, we've had a lot of the officers has done a lot of work, and members has also done a lot of work looking at the budget. So, and it's not to diminish the work that's already been done, not at all, but it's just to make sure that when we make the final decision, that it's done with the public in mind as well as members.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Russell.
Going on to the recommendation, although I think we're broadly in agreement about the percentage, I think the recommendation should be that members recommend a precept of 1 point whatever it is, 6 million to council rather than a percentage increase. I think that's the normal thing. We're agreeing a precept, not necessarily a percentage increase.
I think the proposal should be, or the wording that is subject to it being agreed, is that this committee recommends to council adopting a council tax precept for the year 2024-25 of £1,625,930. I hope I've got the figure correct, because I'd hate it to get minuted and get it wrong and suddenly we've had some various comments from members. Have members got any other comments before I seek a resolution or recommendation?
Hello, Mr. Chair.
If there's no further comments to be wished to be made, could somebody please make a formal recommendation?
I'm happy to recommend, as you just pronounced. It was slightly longer than what I'd said, but that we recommend a precept effectively of 1.6 whatever it is million to council next week.
Have you got I think the wording will be is available and recorded, so to speak, in any event. I'll happily take an observation from a council. I know he's not a formal member of this committee and he's not present, but I'll take it, see if the proposal's seconded, and then I'll see if Councillor Skelton would like to speak.
So if it's not seconded, I'll happily second.
Thank you. That's moved and seconded. Before I put it to the vote, if Councillor Skelton would like to make any observations at this stage, we'll take them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The only observation really was just around the report. Can you hear me?
I think it is, but I will check again.
I can't hear anything at all now.
Okay, we can hear you now, so please.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really, the only observation was around bandings, and I know council tax comparison is always done on a band D. Might it be helpful and transparent to the public if we put the costs across all bands, as there are many properties in Biggleswade that aren't band D, and a band D property these days is out of the reach financially for many residents, especially younger families and people starting out on the property ladder. So I think you know, the increase across all the bands might be helpful to members of the public. Thank you.
Thank you for those observations. I won't come back to you after that. So is there anything else you want to say before I deal with it? And I think I'll then ask the town clerk to make an observation on that, because I think I know what the answer is going to be. But anything for else, Councillor Skelton?
No, that's everything. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Tarrant, perhaps you'd like to just comment on that, because I know what I think in terms of practicalities, but I appreciate your observations.
Yeah, this doesn't deter from the observation, but the calculus that we use, the auto calculus that we use, is an auto calculus purely based on band D. If members were to determine that they wanted additional information, we would have to do a separate calculation. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's personally, I think it's totally impractical, because I have a feeling that it gets very, very difficult to determine. Councillor Russell.
I'd just like to say that the norm in all councils is to look at band D, because it's the middle band. I've never been in a meeting where other bands have been looked at in detail. And as you say, Chairman, it's a very complex calculation. So I think we should stick with the norm, which is, as we said in the recommendation, to recommend the actual value of the precept. And as has been said previously, it's helpful to say the increase in band D maybe on an annual amount, as has just been said.
You're quite right. It's the precept we're setting, not a band rate one way or the other. So that's the proposal that's been put forward. I'll take any. I know Councillor Knight wishes to say something else. Is anybody else going to wish to speak? Because I would then hope I'll be able to put this proposal to the vote. Knight.
Just going to ask, does the proposal include making sure we get the additional information we've requested in terms of the per account code budgets, please?
It didn't, but I take the slap on the wrist. I think we need two parts to the proposal. I think it's very important that we agree the precept level, and then maybe we can put a second proposal with the other issues that we've just discussed.
I'm happy to put your proposal first, Councillor Russell. It's been proposed and seconded. I've noted Councillor Knight's comments, and I won't close this particular part of the meeting until I've asked Councillor Knight to make a further comment, and if necessary, a proposal. So all those in favour of the proposal with regard to the precept, which has been read out previously. All those in favour, please signify. That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, members. Councillor Knight.
So in addition, I'd like to propose that additional information is provided to council, providing a detailed breakdown by account code, showing a comparison against last year's budget, please.
Seconded in a number of places. Any further comment by anyone? In fact, there's no further comment. Officers are heard and have already commented. All those in favour, please signify. Again, that's carried unanimously. Thank you, members. We get on to more complicated things, such as the quarterly bank reconciliation. Mr. Youngs.
This is just the regular report that comes every quarter. I'd just like to thank Councillor Woodhead very much for being willing to sign all 5 accounts off again. He's been a great support. Next quarter, there will be the new bank account, which is just open for the cricket club. And I hope that all the signatories will have received a letter over the last day or two, just as information, really. But yes, thank you very much to Councillor Woodhead.
Thank you, Mr. Youngs. Members. Councillor Allbone.
Yeah, so I move that we note this as set out in the papers, And also I, as a signatory, I have received a letter from Unisbank. So, Mr. Youngs to know.
Thank you. Is that seconded? Thank you. That's Councillor Foster seconded. Any further comments? In which case, all those in favour, please signify. That's again carried unanimously. Thank you, members. The next item is 9C, is the additional credit card. Again, there is a report and explanation. I think Mr. Tarrant wishes to speak on this particular point.
So hopefully the report is self-explanatory. At the moment, I'm the only person in the council who has a credit card that can be used in the odd circumstance. As the report describes, in the vast majority of cases, we pay payments through BACS. It's extremely rare that we would do otherwise. However, the credit card is there to be used in emergency situations or situations where it can't easily be done in a quick and timely manner. One of the observations from the internal auditor when members looked at the report previously was that we might consider having an additional card holder for those circumstances that warranted it going forward. And I'd like to recommend this to members consistent with the report that's laid out here.
Thank you, Mr. Tarrant. Members' comments and observations, please. Councillor Russell.
It seems eminently sensible, and there is a fairly low limit on the credit card, so I suggest that we accept the recommendation as on the paper.
Thank you. That's moved. Seconded. Seconded in several places. An observation that I would make, there's a second point to the recommendation with regard to the financial regulations. I think if we just take the first part with regard, as set out as the first part of the recommendation, and then I'd make an observation about dealing with the financial regulations separately, if members would be happy with that.
I'm very happy with it because I am concerned that we're altering financial regulations bit by bit by bit, and I suspect what your recommendation might be, Chairman. So I'm quite happy to just take the first half.
Thank you. Any further comments from members? In which case, all those in favour, please signify. Thank you. That is carried again unanimously. Mr. Tarrant, you've got a second part there about changing the financial regulations and to bring them up to date to be able to reflect this. Perhaps you could let us know what your thought processes are with regard to when this should be coming to council for financial regulations, because I anticipate that in order to implement the first part of the proposed recommendation, this regulation will need to be updated very quickly before it can actually be implemented. But as Councillor Russell says, we don't want to be go about changing regulations piecemeal. And whilst I think everybody's accepted that we need this, could you please let us have your proposals with to how we will deal with this to formalise the arrangements?
Yes, I mean, I'd like to use the next meeting of council predominantly to focus upon urgent and paramount issues. But I think probably the meeting after the next council would be an opportune time for us to bring forward the financial regulations. It's important this, but it's not critical that we get the credit card as soon as possible. So let's give us time to rework those and then bring them back to council.
Right, I think it makes every sense. Next council's only a week away. It would be, in my mind, foolish to rush changing regulations because there's always knock-on effects with numbering and other things. So I think that from a practical point of view, I would recommend that this meeting, instructs the clerk to come back with a report to an appropriate council meeting in order to enable council to implement the first part of the recommendation. And I think that if it delays the credit card by a few weeks, it's better to make sure that we get the right financial regulations rather than rush it through for the sake of convenience. Members, your thoughts, please. Russell.
Can I just ask that the clerk looks carefully with Mr. Youngs to see if there's a need for any other updates so that we can do them at the same time?
I think that should be, if someone could propose we work on that basis, including that point, I think that'd be sensible. Any further comments, or is anyone prepared to second Councillor Russell's proposal? Councillor Foster, thank you for seconding it. Any further comments or observations? In which case I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please signify. That's carried unanimously. Thank you, members. Item for information, number 10, there are none. Item 11, public open session. Again, we've got no one physically present. I imagine we've still got people online. Does any member of the public wish to speak, please, Funda? Thank you, members. There are no exempt items, so in that respect, before I close the meeting, I'd just like to thank officers and indeed all members for the efforts they've put in working out the budget, because there's been a lot of thought over a period of time in doing so. And I hope that the people of the town will appreciate the efforts that have gone in from any number of people. So personal thanks, certainly in that respect, to the officers and indeed my fellow members for the time and efforts that have gone in, because we had a very detailed proposals which won't obviously been seen tonight, but we have spent a lot of time in trying to get a budget that we could recommend to the council next week, on which basis I will now close the meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance.